Welcome to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. And in between, in the middle, Troy Waymaster from the 109th
Yes,
District, which
109th
would be the
District.
Bunker Hill area, right?
That's my hometown, but it's pretty much north central Kansas and central Kansas. From
Awesome.
Smith County all the way to Rush County.
All right, appreciate you coming in today. And as you're watching the show, you've seen it lots of times, but if you haven't seen it before, the idea is, of course, that when John Barker's 70th District gets out of the legislative session on Friday, he comes right to the studio. He always brings a good friend with him and another representative or a senator, and thank you for being here. And so John brings us the latest information, and in this case, Troy will too. The latest information, what's going on in the legislature. So John, what's going on?
Week 7. We were on the floor, run a few bills this week. In Fed and State, we worked a few bills. Worked one today that had to do with complying to the federal government in their appropriations bill reduce or increase the smoking age from 18 to 21. Our bill complies with the federal legislation. We had a number of people come in, mostly school districts, who testified for the bill, because it's almost an epidemic, the amount of vaping going on in schools. Yeah. So that moves the vaping up from 18 to 21. They have a lot of 18-year-olds that are still in high school who buy it for the younger kids. So they thought this would be helpful. And if we don't comply, we lose some money from the federal government. So it did pass out of committee. Wednesday, I was on my post-audit committee, and we finally got our post-audit on the Department of Labor, and we'll talk about that in maybe not the next segment, but the third segment, which showed how much fraud has been perpetrated on the Department of Labor. But other than that, we've been busy. Turnaround. Today was the last day for non-exempt committees to get their bills out. We will be on the floor Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of next week all day, working those bills. I was told 26 committee reports were sent in just today, and they're expecting another 26 or 30 by Monday. And this is where the committees complete their work and send it out to the whole House. So next week's going to be long days, but they normally are. Then we have turnaround, and which means we'll take off about 3 days. We'll come back on the 10th. During that time, the two houses will swap their bills over. But that's basically what's going on. Troy, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, the only thing I would add, and we probably talk about this a little bit later in regards to the fraud activity that's been going on with the Department of Labor. I mean, obviously that's been a overwhelming issue with the Department of Labor. We knew it was going to happen late last summer, and last spring when the pandemic hit. But I don't think we realized it was going to be as much of an impact to the unemployment insurance fund as it was.
Yeah.
We were always trying to get numbers from the Department of Labor, and even after this post-audit came out the other day, they were still questioning the amount of money that the legislative post-audit said had been lost due to fraudulent activity to the Department of Labor. I mean, their audit came back with $600 million.
Conservative figure.
That's a conservative figure.
It could be 800.
That's a tremendous amount of money. Who's in control of that Department of Labor?
Ultimately, the governor.
The governor.
The governor, it's in her administration. The other thing to keep in mind with the Department of Labor is that since last spring, they have had 4 different secretaries. So there has been kind of an upheaval in that department,
right.
Because you've had so many administrative changes. But at the same time, they should have been looking at the fraudulent activity that's been going on in the Department of Labor.
And I'd like to, the first secretary was one of her staff, her assistant chief of staff, someone who understands politics but does not understand the Department of Labor and how it works. The second one was the same. I'm hopeful that the lady they have in now understands the importance of it and the fraud aspect of it and tries to do something. We will not get that money back.
No.
Where'd the money come from?
Well, some of it's from the federal government, but our unemployment fund is funded by employers.
Yeah, and that's where the money is generated. And before the pandemic hit, I mean, we had north of $1 billion in that fund to address unemployment.
That's a lot.
Now we're down to $200 million.
Now we're down to $200 million.
So this $800,000 that's lost, how does that get made up?
800 million.
800 million, yeah. Yeah, 800,000 would be fine.
As John mentioned, through the taxing of employers
Right.
is how that's going to be replenished.
And employers will be paying more into that unemployment fund than they probably will be in income taxes.
Boy, that's too bad.
Yeah.
That is too bad.
It's
no
a
fault
large
of the
issue.
employers. It's our fault. It's the state's fault. This administration's fault.
Okay.
Yes.
We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. As you're watching this on your screen, that's John on your left. And in the middle between us is Troy Waymaster from the 109th. And Troy, before we jump into the things that you're doing, what committees are you on?
I am the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the House of Representatives. That's the only committee that I serve on.
Well, that's a pretty big one.
Because we deal with the budget.
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, I'm busy all day with meetings with either department heads or individuals who are advocating for items to be put into the state budget.
Okay, can you give us an idea where all of this is right now?
Well, actually, we just finished up with pretty much all of the budget committees reporting out to the Appropriations Committee, and that's how the process works. Once we get the governor's budget, our research department splits that up, and then they go to the respective budget committees. They hold the hearings. They have the meetings with the department heads or the particular agencies, and then the chairperson of that budget committee then reports back the budget recommendations from the budget committees, and then the Appropriations Committee ultimately decides whether or not we're going to include those items into the state budget. One thing I'd like to kind of back up a little bit, and when the governor proposed her budget right at the beginning of session, she had some interesting ways of balancing her budget. One of those, which you probably have talked about on this show before, was basically the refinancing of the unfunded liability of CAPERS. And just to note that that is a one-time savings of $160 million for fiscal year 2022. However, if we extend basically the refinancing of that unfunded liability, it's a cost to the taxpayers of the state of Kansas of $7.4 billion
Wow.
in extra interest.
And that's the one that the interest on that is 7.75?
Yes.
Is that right? And I know John's had this one come up before because of the years we've been doing this. And John, when he first started in the legislature, he would tell me that he said, I had people who would ask me, will there be money in the CAPERS account when I get ready for retirement? And so I know this has been a priority for you.
I was on the
guys.
CAPERS committee our first 2 years and got a very big interest. Of course, as a retired judge, I draw a retirement check from them. But the executive director is a great guy. The board of directors has not recommended the refinancing of it. This is the governor. She tried it last year.
This is her third year trying it.
Yeah.
And both times we have voted it down in the House. And I would presume that we're going to do the same thing on this. So we've already started backing that particular piece out of the budget and looking at other avenues. And actually, where the state is sitting right now, as far as an ending balance, is we're in a pretty good position. A lot better than we had anticipated when we had the revenue estimates that came out last April. Last April, when they came back with those adjustments, it was a pretty dire situation. We were looking at nearly an $800 million deficit in fiscal year 2022. When they did the readjustment in November with the consensus revenue estimate group, it was a better position for the state. And then also, except with the exception of 1 month, and I believe that was in the month of May in 2020, we have exceeded the expectations every single month. And in fact, last month, we exceeded those expectations by $90 million.
Wow.
And so if you look at the profile for the state budget where it's at right now, according to whatever the governor wants to do, we do have an ending balance in fiscal year 2022 of about $760 million. And then right now, for fiscal year 2021, we have an ending balance of about $925 million. So we are in a healthy position. So we can take those adjustments that the governor wanted to make, we can back those out and still have an ending balance for the state of Kansas.
Good, good. All right. And John, what else have you ran into so far this week?
Well, I think you'll put on the screens a couple of these graphs that we're talking about with the Department of Labor.
Yes.
About the initial claims, and the blue graph at the top graph will show how many claims were filed. Of course, they went down in June and July. The federals went up, and then in September, they just went off the board. In September, we had 22,905 claims initiated, and then in January, we had 134,000. So that's the reason the fraud is the most important thing here. We've got to address that. The Department of Labor needs to address that. And I'm tired of getting constituents. I like constituents to call me, send me emails, and I'm sure Troy's got them.
I've got many
of them about they call the Department of Labor. They can't get a response. They don't answer their phones. They won't answer their emails. A number of people called me, and I said, well, last week, the Department of Labor said they're not going to answer our calls as representatives. So I don't know, but talk about that.
The turnaround time right now for constituents who are having, actual unemployment claims, and they're valid, is 2 weeks. And even just getting a call back, it's not even a day or two. It's being 2 weeks until they actually get a call.
Right.
And of course,
if they get a call.
And in a lot of cases, I have constituents who have not been able to get a hold of anybody in the Department of Labor, and they haven't received any unemployment benefits, and they are valid unemployment claims since October or November, and they just cannot reach anybody. One thing that we try to do, I was on the Strengthening People and Revitalizing Kansas Task Force, which evaluated the $1 billion that came into the state of Kansas directly from the federal government in regards to the CARES Act. And one thing that we always talked about was if we had any money left over, which we do, since Congress extended that deadline from December 30th, 2020, we actually had a motion that if there's any money left over, then that money goes into the unemployment insurance fund. So we can start to try to replenish it with federal dollars. However, and many times when we brought that up at the State Finance Council meeting, which I'm also a member of, and that's led by the governor, and she has veto authority in that committee, and whenever it was brought up, she would veto it.
Right.
And then finally in December, we had a meeting, and that remaining dollar amount was supposed to be transferred into the unemployment insurance fund. But since Congress extended that with what we call CARES Act 2 in December, that negated that motion that was made in the State Finance Council, and so we don't have any money that's been put back into the unemployment insurance fund.
Okay. All right. We're going to cut away, take a break. You're watching Legislative Updates. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Legislative Updates. I'm your host, Doug Thompson, with my co-host, John Barker. In the middle, is Troy Waymaster from the 109th District. And this is Friday, and these gentlemen kind enough to stop by the studio and give us the updates about what's going on in the legislature. And John, I had asked Troy before we cut away to break about what committees he's on. What committees are you on?
Well, I chair the Federal and State Affairs Committee, which is one of the 3 exempt committees. Troy has one, I have one, and the tax chair has a non-exempt committee. And then I'm on Health and Human Services. And then I'm also on post-audit, which one of the committees that ordered this audit evaluating the Kansas Department of Labor. And I would like to mention that the folks can go to this website. You go to the Kansas Legislature. On the side you'll see a legislative post-audit. You can click on that. You can bring up all the audits that they've conducted in the last 4 or 5 years. This one's the most recent. It just came out on Wednesday. And you can look up how the fraud took place, what the allegations are. I know the governor's office is blaming the federal government, but as I mentioned in one of the committees, it was a political two-step dance that, it's never me, it's always someone else responsible.
Yeah. I know, John, in the first segment you were talking about that's coming up now is turnaround. Can you explain what turnaround is?
All right. We have a certain amount of days. It's placed in our joint rules with the Senate that non-exempt committees has to work all their bills, get them out passed on the floor of the House, and then they then go to the Senate. The Senate needs to do the same. They send all their bills over to us. And so, because after turnaround, House committees that are non-exempt, like Troy's and mine, they must work Senate bills. They can't work House bills unless those House bills have been blessed by the Speaker.
Okay, so if somebody has submitted a bill and it doesn't go anywhere, and if it's not one of those it's involved in the turnaround, it dies for that session?
It does.
It does.
Okay, I'm getting a hang on this here.
Getting struck from the calendar is what we call it. Striking it from the calendar.
And this is pretty much like the midpoint of our legislative session.
Right.
The turnaround, turn point is.
Yeah. When we come back, it'll be getting real busy.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You guys seem awfully busy when John comes in and says, "How you doing?" And he said, "Well, this is week 6 or this is week 7 now." And he said, "That feels like 52 already because they've been so busy, so much going on."
Well, and there's just been a lot going on, obviously, with the pandemic, that we haven't even had to change how we conduct legislative business. It's just a different environment in the Capitol this year. And then also, we were kind of talking a little while ago about all the federal money that is coming into the state. And a lot of that money is already tied for specific reasons. And we're still actually trying to get exactly how much the state of Kansas is going to be receiving from the CARES Act 2 that was passed and signed by the president in December. I mean, we do know that the school districts across the state of Kansas will be receiving about $360 to $370 million directly to the school districts. Higher education is going to be receiving about $103 million. But we're still trying to get a finite number on how much we're going to be receiving. And then we haven't even mentioned the $1.9 trillion relief package that they're discussing in Congress now. And that one could be used to backfill some state general fund dollars or state debt or budgets. And like we were talking before with the Department of Labor and the replenishing of that unemployment insurance fund, my prerogative would be that if we receive any federal dollars, given where we're sitting right now as an ending balance, we need to have some of that money dedicated to the unemployment insurance fund.
To make up for the loss?
To make up for the loss.
Yeah. It was not the employer's fault.
No, it's not. And they shouldn't be taxed.
And they shouldn't be taxed. Exactly.
Oh, my goodness. Well, that's interesting. And
there's always nuances to every day in the legislature.
Could you mention about the budget committees and how they report? How many budget committees do we have?
There's 6.
There's 6 budget
There are 6 budget committees.
They're broke down by different departments.
Yes.
Right?
All the agencies and departments' budgets are broken out among those 6 budget committees, and then they have the hearings. And a lot of those, like, for example, I'll say general government budget, and they pretty much handle most of the state agencies and departments, and a lot of those budgets are fee-funded. So there's not a lot of state general fund dollars in there. But then you have, some that are. And so that's where we really can manage and maneuver the amount of money that's going out of the state general fund for those budgets. So they have, like I said, they have the hearings. They bring in, the secretaries and individuals with those particular agencies and departments, and they go through the budgets, and then they deliberate and work on it, and then the chairperson then reports that back to the appropriations committee, and they're kind of on the hot seat when that happens.
That is. I've been on appropriations, and I wouldn't want it to be a budget committee chair.
And I was a budget chair before I was chairman of appropriations, so I understand that process very, very well, and I meet with the budget chairman every week on Wednesdays at 3:00. We have a meeting just to find out, how, what's working well in your committees, what's going on, and so that way some of us are already briefed before they actually do report out, and it's a good way for them to just kind of, express exactly what's going on in their committees, and then and I've always told them, I said, I've been in your shoes, so I will not be overly critical when you report out, but then the appropriations committee we'll go through each line item if there has to be a change from the governor's budget, and then decide whether or not we want to have that included in the overall state budget or not.
Okay, so if you're one of the secretaries of these committees that are coming in, you better know your material because you're going to get asked a lot of tough questions.
Oh, you get asked a lot of questions. Like today we had Social Services Budget Committee, and we had the departments of the Department of Children and Families and the Kansas Department of Disability and Aging Services. And so there was probably 12 to 15 additional items that we had to go through from the Budget Committee into the Appropriations Committee.
I'm sure most people that are watching this show and that don't have any more experience at it than me, that they're saying, boy, this is just it's hard to absorb all of this, but thank you guys for doing it. We're going to cut away, take a break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our final segment of Legislative Updates with John Barker. And, of course, our guest in between us is Troy Waymaster. Thank you guys so much for taking time to come in on a Friday and share this with us because, you know, as I look at it, just like anybody else, and I see the federal government sending out the money, I don't have a clue how all of this works, where the money comes from, how it goes back, but I trust in you guys that you're going to do everything you can for the state of Kansas. So thank you. Thank you, guys. And we'll see you next time on Legislative Updates.